Hi. Today we're going to go over some beginning or introductory stuff about procedural texturing. And what procedural texturing means is that rather than using kind of an outside source like Photoshop or the like to create images that we're going to use as textures, we're going to kind of create them within 3D Studio. Procedural texturing is textures created via algorithmic mathematical calculations. So don't worry, we're not going to have to actually do any math. That's the good news. We just have to use texture or shaders created by those who know how to use math. And it's all going to kind of be done mostly on the inside of 3D Studio Max. We might cheat here and there again for our final little thing. But at first, let's kind of do kind of an introduction and do a little experiment with some very, very simple procedural texturing. And then we'll get into a little bit more of an advanced procedural texturing as well, just so that you guys get to make something kind of cool and get a really in-depth idea of what procedural texturing is in 3D Studio. So for this first part here, we're going to create a brick wall without pictures of bricks. While that may be the easiest still is using an image of bricks because you get all those little subtle colors and changes and things like that from real-world application. What I'm doing here is I'm just going to kind of create a wall or a box in the shape of something like a wall here. You can follow along with me if you like, or just watch so you get a good idea of how this is really going to work. And then I'm going to go to my Modify tab here and add a UVW map modifier so that we can get some coordinates and have a little bit more control over how this procedural texture is displayed on our box or our wall. So we're going to add that one, and I'm going to make a couple of settings changes here before we get going, just some basic ones that I kind of know we're going to need. And I'm going to mark our material map as, rather than planar, a box, so that we get it on all sides here. And then just so that everything is kind of similar all the way around, I'm going to give the length, width, and height of our UVW map gizmo all the same. So we're going to go with 75, 75, and 75. And that should give us, the same size bricks on the long side of the wall as the short side, so that nothing is squished or stretched in any way. Secondly, I'm going to make sure that my renderer is kind of set to mental ray here. If you've ever set or created a preset, you can go through and do all your settings in your renderer, which we'll get to later on in this course, and then save a preset down here with this little drop down. We'll do that here in the future. I have one, so I'm just going to kind of load it up, which has some magic numbers and some cool stuff that for rendering, so we get a good result out of this. And then I'm going to hop into my material editor. The hotkey to open up your material editor is M, and you can also reach it by using this little icon up here at the top on your main toolbar next to your rendering stuff. It looks like a sphere with a checkerboard pattern on it, and you've got that dialog over it. If you click and hold, you have two choices, either the slate or the compact. We want to use the one that looks like a dialog over it rather than the bar to bar. And we're going to open up the compact material editor. If for some reason you just click this and it opens up slate, no worries. You can go to modes and then select compact rather than slate. Because it's going to give us a good idea of how these textures kind of stack on top of each other to create a final result. Inside here you'll find our regular stuff, which we kind of went over in our introductory lesson on materials and the material editor. In our diffuse slot here, we're gonna go into this channel box. We can also open up our maps rollout, and the diffuse color is the exact same thing as our little empty channel box up here. So take your pick, doesn't matter which one. Go ahead and click it, and our material map browser is going to open up for us here. Before we get going, let's just, all of these guys down in here are procedural textures. You're going to use them for various things, some of them lots and some of them very rarely. But this bitmap one here, this is how we're going to load in, let's say, an image if we create our textures outside source from a program like Photoshop, etc. The rest of these guys are our procedural shaders. everything from swirls and stucco and splatter patterns and smoke, cellulars, checkerboards, etc. The one we're going to do today here real quick is just to introduce this to you is the tiles. So go ahead and select that from the list and say OK. Immediately on our thing, I'm going to open up just kind of a preview window here by double clicking my sample slot, and it'll open up right into our tiles settings changes. The very top one that says coordinates will always be the same. We're going to go ahead and minimize it right away because we don't need that in our way there. And then we've got a noise settings box. We don't want to add any noise to our pattern here, so we're going to minimize that one. And the other one that opens right up is our standard controls. We've only got one setting in here, and that's a drop-down menu as to what kinds of tiles it's going to be able to create for us mathematically. It's defaulted to stack bond. You can take a look at the various patterns on how these tiles are stacked. I'm going to put this to box so that we can actually see these a little bit better. Again, your button up here in the top right hand corner of your material editor, click and hold, and you can change the display type of the standard object just for our sample slots. It has no bearing whatsoever on our final texture. But box gives us an overall better idea, right? So if you're doing kind of a bathroom tile, this fine stack bond works a little bit better. Fine running bond, you get just a little bit offset here, different. Our original stack bond is nothing but box after box after box, your standard tiles. And what we want to do, you can go through these and check them out yourself, see how they differ. But what we're going to use today is the running bond, which offsets our tiles, kind of like, oh, dare I say it, a brick wall. And that kind of pushes the grout or the whatever's in between our bricks here, right, off to the side as we get one brick, and then right in the center of it on top of it get another. We kind of offset those stacks, kind of like a brick wall is normally made. Underneath here is our advanced controls, and this has all of our settings in it as to how we can manipulate this tile or this procedural shader here. Right off the bat, we have two color swatches, which also can contain images or more procedural shaders in here. For our quick demonstration here, we want to make a brick wall, so this first texture clearly is the lighter color gray, and then the grout setup in between is our darker color gray, our tile. So let's make this tile's color swatch something similar to that of a brick. I'm going to kind of go with a rusty red brick color here. Just click on it and get your own color. It doesn't really matter at this point. I just want to be able to make this look a little bit more like bricks. Say OK. And then the color texture swatch for your grout can be anything you want, from kind of a darker gray to our lighter white firehouse kind of brick thing. I want to go a little darker because I kind of like the contrast between our red color and our darker gray grout mortar, so to speak. Okay, so there's our first two settings, these color swatches. One for tiles and one for grout or mortar in between. Secondary settings here, right, for this particular shader, we have our counts, horizontal count, and then for our grout it's the gap. If I increase that, our gaps will get either smaller or larger vertically, and we can kind of fill in a whole lot of grout or little tiny tiles or vice versa. Right now the 0.5s for our grout seem okay to me. Our horizontal and vertical count here is how we're going to define whether or not these things look like tiles or whether or not they're going to end up looking like bricks. So for a horizontal count, 1, 2, 3, 4 across, versus our vertical count, we're going to want to offset these, right? We want less across than we want vertical, so that we get that kind of squashed shape of a brick, which are wider across and thinner going vertically. So if I double this, let's say a vertical count of 8, right? Going across, we have a lot more width or space for our horizontal count, so our number is less. We get less bricks going across than we do going up, and that gives us sort of that squashed, longer brick look. At this point, I can actually kind of click, drag, and drop this over to my wall here. And remember, if you want it to show up in your viewport, you have to turn on that Show Shaded Material in Viewport toggle switch, which is our fourth button in underneath our sample slots from the right. At this point, we can kind of start looking at our wall maybe a little bit more. See if I Alt W, it can make that viewport larger. Alt W again to get it smaller. Shift F will turn on our safe frame, so we know exactly what's going to show up in, let's say, a final render. If our monitors are a different setting than what we're trying to get as far as an image in the end. And here's our basics of bricks. We've also got some other color settings here, that I like to talk about. Color variance. We can go, let's say, 1.0 for high, and that kind of shifts the color just a bit. Whereas we're going to get some different colored bricks, which kind of brings a new interesting element to our bricks here. I put in a color variance of 1, 0.5. If you take a look at your actual sample slot, you'll see that a larger number has an extreme effect on our bricks, whereas something small has a more subtle variance to our bricks. I'm going to go with, let's say, about 0.4. It doesn't look too shabby. Then again, on my brick wall, if I do a quick render here, I've got some color variance in there that doesn't look too bad. We have a fade variance, and that is, rather than color, it would be our tint, our shade, or our tint here. So if I crank that up, well, let's see, I cranked it back down, and yeah, there we go. We've got a good shade there. But if I turn this up, 0.05, remember that. If I turn this up to like 1.0 here, we tend to get a little bit more extreme. We're getting into the grays and the added white or blacks here. Negative value, or 0, gives us no change in shades, or not as much. Again, 0.05 is what it defaults at us, and we may want to take that with a grain of salt, kind of how far we want that to go. Maybe 0.5 gives us quite a difference in those bricks, and kind of gives us some kind of ugly ones. We don't want those in there. Maybe we do, depending on how grungy you want to get this thing. So let's go with like a 0.1, and we're going to do a test of our render here. I think we'll stick with kind of 0.05 there. Just a quick idea here. If you want to see exactly what's going on in your viewport with your textures, you're going to have to turn some different viewport settings on as to how to get this stuff to show up. If we come up to Views menu, Viewport or Show Materials in Viewport As, and we choose the last one, Realistic Materials with Maps, it's going to show you exactly what's going to happen in our render, or it's going to really truly try to show you exactly what's going to happen in our render. So if I go, 0.1, 0.5, change that all the way up to 5, we get some very, drastic results versus none, or 0.05 or something very small. Gives us a little bit different results in there. The color variance, I might be able to go a little lower on it. Higher, 0.2, 0.3, right? We're just starting to get a little bit until we're happy with that variance. I want to be subtle effect rather than something truly stark. We've also got underneath our grout settings a percentage for the amount of holes. If I start slowly turning this up, let's say 5%, 5% holes, which means some of these tiles are going to be missing. No tile at all grout. And that can have some interesting effects, especially if we want to put holes in our walls. We can use the same idea in a procedural map, etc. So choose this carefully. I don't want any holes in my brick wall right now, so we're going to leave it there. Increasing the roughness, as you can see, adds a little bit of noise basically between our bricks and our wall. So if you want kind of hairy looking bricks or fuzzy looking bricks, or maybe you find a completely different use for this procedural shader, and you want to change some things around, you can do that. Our bricks should be fairly straightforward. Maybe we can do like a 1%, which gives us a little bit of wavy, gives us a little bit more rocky look to that brick, but not too much more than that. Last setting here is our seed, our random seed. The number you put in here is simply going to change the random order of our tiles and the colors of our tiles, etc. So that, let's say you create this wall and you want to make another wall, but you don't want it to have exactly the same color on this one. You create another texture and simply change the seed on that, and it'll just reorganize for you a little bit. So there we go. Introduction to procedural shaders. Likewise, we can take these into some of the other channels. I can actually copy this tile, put it down here in my bump, go in, and rather, instead of colors, if I want my tile to protrude, I can make that white, and my grout to recede, I can make that a black or a darker color. And then I've got some serious bump map coming on here, which will kind of really help us in the future as we use some lights and things like that to determine some detail that doesn't actually exist on a very, very simple wall here. And that's how we kind of get some detail in our video games and things like that. Now that we've done the introductory how procedural textures work, right? We add them into our particular channels and manipulate the settings to create a texture without using images. So now let's do something a little bit more advanced, just because the advanced stuff's always the coolest to do. And we're going to create kind of a molten lava with rock intermittently surrounding areas, sort of a texture, like there's some rock pointing through, some little rivers of lava, because you know what, who's not excited by hot lava and rivers of magma? So I'm going to delete my box here. We can leave our bricks there, that's fine. I'm going to find a new texture slot here. And rather than a box this time to create a wall, I'm going to go to my Create tab, and I'm just going to create a sphere. Click kind of right there in the center and drag out a sphere of, we'll change the size and some settings here on the Modifier tab. If I get my Move tool, I can perfectly center this sphere to our grid by coming down here to our XYZ coordinates and simply right-clicking on those little slider arrows. And it'll kind of zero everything out, put it right in the center of my 3D virtual world for me. Just a quick little trick for you. And then let's go over to our Modify tab. Let's make a radius, just so we're all on the same page, of about 45. We can leave the segments at 32. We can increase those if we need to, as far as using displacement maps or something like that, or you know, decrease them if we're making game textures, something like that. And then down here, we definitely want to checkbox in our generate mapping coordinates, but also put one in your base to pivot so that it moves that up, that pivot point down to the bottom of our sphere. So our sphere's kind of sitting on virtual ground here, even though we don't have a ground. Maybe we'll put one in later. And this will get us started for at least playing around with textures. We're just doing kind of a render texture test here. Take an empty material slot, and let's go ahead and drag and drop that onto our sphere. And make sure to put the Show Shaded Material in Viewport button toggled on. That's this guy right here that looks like a checkerboard with a light bulb over top of it. And we're going to create kind of a generic shader here. All of our default settings in our basic parameters, we can go ahead and play around with those. We're going to create some shaders here for our diffuse. We might even use, in the future, we're probably going to use an image of rock just because we want to save a little bit of time here. But the overall shader will be completely procedural. Let's go ahead and put like a 30% in specular just to give our rock surface maybe a little bit of a sheen. And you know, we can leave everything else, I think, as is for right now. Go to our glossiness down to 0 so that we spread that sheen out a little bit. To get us started, I'm going to open the maps rollout because we're going to spend quite a bit of time going back and forth into different channels as we use various procedural textures to create this little effect. The first one we're going to do is clearly our diffuse channel. As long as this little guy up here, Show Shaded Material in Viewport, is toggled on, we'll be able to see what's happening over here on our sphere. So let's go into the diffuse channel. It doesn't matter whether you click this little guy or this one down here in our maps rollout. And we're going to select a procedural texture or procedural map from this list that gets used an awful lot. It's one of my most used, I think, that I will use. And we're going to go and add a noise. Right away, you can kind of see what's happening on our sample slot here. Actually, I'm going to blow that up so that we can see exactly what's going on with our sample slot. A little bit more than our final thing, but this will be good for a render test here in the future. And what we're going to do is modify, again, the settings that it gives us. This guy always appears our coordinates. You can play around with those, especially if you're using an image later on, but we don't need those right now. We want to get into the actual parameters of our noise material. In here, we've got three different choices of noise type. Right now, it defaults at regular, which is kind of a blurry overall generic noise. We've also got fractal, which looks a little bit more cloudy and gives us a little bit more detail as we raise this idea here, the levels. We've also got turbulence, which works really well for things like rivers, tributaries, lightning and fire, and some other kind of tenderly effects. So we're going to go ahead and use turbulence for this one because we want rivers of molten lava. And then we're going to come down here to the other noise settings and kind of continue working from these guys. We're going to stack a few of these on top of each other. And then maybe at the end I'll show you what those all look like out in the slate editor so that we don't lose anything here. I like to kind of bump my levels up a little bit to get a little bit more detail. You can only go between 0 and 10. I think this time we're going to go up to about 6 because we're going to use a few different levels as we go through this and do our procedural texture mapping here. The next very important one here is going to be size. I'm going to reduce it just a little. I'm going to go down to about 20 so we can kind of see this and how this is going to work. And then we've got our noise threshold. Right now it's very even and it kind of fades from white to black over time, so we get a lot more grays. If you want some stark changes, which in our case we do, very stark between rock and between river of lava, we're going to have to play around with these high and low threshold numbers. So if I make them fairly close together, we're going to get a very, very immediate change from black to white, instant. As well as, you know, the lower I go overall, let's say our high to 0.25, and we're going to get more of one type of color, more of one color as far as white or black is concerned than the other. In our low, let's get these right next to each other because we do want a fairly stark change. I'm going to go 0.2. And you'll see that immediately we get this clearer definition of kind of rivers that may be of magma going in between, let's say, our rock. Further on, you know, we've got black and white in here now, but we've also got these great little channel maps of our own. So if I hit the go to parent button just to back out, we can kind of get this again. We're going to kind of come out to the back, come back to our original texture settings where you see noise. If I dig into this texture, we've got two more channels that we can add to this one channel that goes back out. So that gives us kind of the start of our flowchart look there, right? 1 breaks off into 2, which breaks off into 4, which breaks off into 8, you know, et cetera, et cetera. For one of these, we want lava. In our case, these little rivers are going to end up looking a little bit more like lava. You can also take a look at your actual sphere and see how it's looking on a real object, since this is just our sample. And we've got some pretty good rivers and tributaries of our lava here going on. So this black one, we want to put in something of a color that's going to be hot lava. So what we're going to do is click on this channel button here. And again, we're going to add a brand new noise. So again, 2 are going to split into 4, which can split into 8. And we can keep stacking these forever and ever and ever. So select noise, say OK. And we've got a brand new noise to adjust here. Our black rivers of lava now have changed to a noisy, regular, blurred out kind of noise between black, gray, and white. So we're going to use these colors now to define what our lava is going to end up looking like. First things first, let's go ahead and adjust the color swatches down here. Our lava should not be black and white. Instead, let's go with some color. And the color that I want to use is in this top one is going to be kind of a red. If let's say we go 155 up here, 0, 0, we're going to get kind of a middle red, right? You can also adjust this just by dragging around to the red that you like. I'm just going to be a little bit more specific, and I know that I want kind of a 155 to 0 green and 0 blue, and that gives us full-on red there. Say OK. Our next one, we want to kind of be, if we want to simulate lava and fire, we want yellows to reds. So we're going to go into the more yellow areas here. I'm going to leave the red up to 255, maybe a green at 170-ish, and no blue at all, which will give me this kind of yellow to yellow gold color. Right, we're mixing here, reds, greens, and blues. So we gotta mix a couple of these, red and green, to get our orangey yellow. Likewise, if I put 170 in this, we'd get, you know, a little bit more exact yellow, maybe towards the green side even a little bit. So if I want it to be yellow-orange, I've got to have more red than green. It's okay. Red and green, they're mixing in here quite a bit. I want to reduce the size to get a little bit more mixture between my rivers of lava, maybe about 10. A little bit better. And maybe I'll go to fractal just to get a little bit more detail out of this stuff. A little bit more in there, right? And you can raise your levels if you really want to see more of a change over time. I'm going to leave mine down around 3 here, but I do want to adjust my high and low thresholds again, because right now we're getting kind of this muddy, blurry change over time. We're going from yellow to red slowly. Again, if I bring my high threshold number down to about 0.65, and maybe my low up to about, I don't know, 0.25, we can get a more immediate change. Not quite as immediate as what we did in the first time, but just a little bit over time between that red to an oranger color and then that yellow-orange color in the end. Then I'm going to find my go-to parent button, right? It's back up here again under our sample slots. It's the second button in from the right-hand side, and it looks like a little checkerboard sphere with a right-angled arrow pointing up. This is very important because we got to go back and forth through this. And if I hit it once, I go back into my original noise. Now we see that new noise that we've put in under this channel. And if I hit it twice, we get back up to the very, very end, or the top of our texture, the original area. Again, clicking on those materials, we dig back in and out, etc. If I back all the way out and then click on my diffuse color again all by itself, I'm right back where I want to be in my original noise. You can give these numbers. I can call this rivers, and then I can dig into the next one and maybe call this lava, and back out, and that way I can see where I'm at, and maybe that'll help me keep things straight, because this can get quite confusing, right? So what I've got is I'm in my rivers noise, and I can see my lava noise right there. Likewise, in this other one, we're going to have rocks here in the future. And we're going to use an image of rocks, even though that's not really, it's not procedural. That's a bitmap or image texturing. But we're going to use an image of rocks because they're going to look the best that way. And we don't want to take up too much time for this tutorial. We can spend 4 hours really kind of creating rocks procedurally as well. So in here, we're going to go ahead and click this, and we are going to add, to begin, let's go ahead and add a bitmap. And then we can navigate to, should have given you this texture to start. But we can find this guy in, and let's see, I'm in the middle of making a tutorial here, so I probably got it in wherever you saved it. Mine's under my procedural texturing tutorial folder, and I've got this kind of a brown ground texture that I think I'll share with you, as though, you know, rocky ground. It'll work. So I'll add it in there. Our white should immediately change to rock colors. This is an image, so we don't have to make any changes there. We can just back out, right? You can change the color to a brown, or add some noises and cellulars and try to create your own rock texture procedurally if you like. But just to save some time, we're gonna use the procedural texture to define our rivers and our lava, but we'll skip it and do an image for the rock because that'll take a little bit longer. Once that's in there, I can kind of back out completely, and we've got, you know, if I take a look at this thing right now, if I render it, what we have is nothing more than an image kind of plastered on here, but we've defined procedurally some rivers of lava and some rock. Now we've got to kind of try and make them more realistic. In our specular level, we can go ahead and add, we can probably add in a specular map that goes along with our rocks. I think I provided one for you, brown ground spec. and that'll solve us some problems there as far as overall what we want to do. We can actually let me right click and clear this. We can copy our original noise. Right click, copy, and we can put that into our specular. If I paste down, which immediately is going to make some of this stuff a little bit more shiny than others. But what I want is, instead of in my ground here, the brown ground, I can change that to specular, and then our specular for our rocks kind of goes away all over our lava, but sticks around in our rock areas. I can just back out twice, and if I wanted, since this is a copy, I can give it a name as well. I can again call this rivers, maybe number 2, and then everything else is. I can actually get rid of this lava in here. Right click and clear that out, so that we don't have any shiny at all for the lava, because it's going to actually be emitting light because it's glowing hot. Right? And so we've kind of done that. If we wanted to do it procedurally from the scratch, we would click the channel button, add a noise, and make all the settings match in our original rivers. So that's looking a little bit better. Our next task, and we'll go ahead and make these procedurally, would be to create the specularity or the self-illumination, to this lava. We want to make it glow. Again, I can right-click, copy that original, come down to the self-illumination channel, right-click, and paste in there. And then backwards from what we did in the specular, we can dig in here. I can call this rivers number 3 if I want to be very organized. And then I don't want the ground to glow at all, so I can right-click and get rid of the image that we put in there and change this texture or color swatch to black, do not glow. The other one, lava, can stick around. We can leave it there because we want it to glow yellow, orange, and red. So a little bit backwards. We have to kind of change this to black so that everywhere that there's rock, basically, it's going to be black in this channel button, which, as you learned in the other lesson, will make it not glow. Anything that we want to glow has to be a lighter color. Up here, we've got a little bit extra bit of a settings. I can actually put a check mark in that color box, and my lava will glow exactly those colors and get quite a bit brighter. All other things I can do is kind of raise that up to 100, but it doesn't quite get as bright as if I turn on that nice little color checkbox. Let's add some actual shape to these rocks here. In this case, we can kind of we can go in and do a bump, which is going to kind of match our original. So once again, I can right-click, copy, come into here and paste that copy. But a bump channel works on a grayscale still here. I might raise the bump a little bit, just maybe about 60, and then dig in here a little bit. Again, I'm only worried about making something bumpy as far as our rocks are concerned. The lava, it might be fairly flat. You could add some shape to it if you like. But just to make things a little simpler, I'm going to right-click on this lava and clear and get rid of it. The settings should remain pretty much about the same because we want the rocks to kind of jut out, etc. But instead of this brown ground for our bump, we can actually use that bump texture that I've also given you, which is a grayscale map and will work a lot better as far as bump maps are concerned. So go ahead and add that in and back out. And then back out again. The final thing we can do to really kind of make this effect kind of hit home would be to add a displacement map and make sure that these islands of rock really do kind of jut farther out than our current level, which is just an illusion, right? Our bump is an illusion, whereas our displacement is actual changes in the geometry. And we can kind of turn this on and maybe reduce the amount. We don't need 100% displacement. Let's do a quarter of that. Maybe go down to 25 just to see what's going on here. The displacement that we want should be pretty much the same, right? Our rivers we want to reseed, and our rocks we want to project. So let's right-click and make sure we copy that original diffuse. I realize it's probably still on the clipboard from last time, but just to be on the safe side, let's right-click, copy, and then down here to displacement, right-click again and paste that copy. It's going to think a little bit on this one because displacement takes more calculation than the others, because it does actually have to change the surface, the geometry of our object. Now, it won't show up in our sample slot, so I'm just going to kind of get rid of that altogether. And we're going to go in here. We're going to kind of change the settings to, for a displacement, which is a little bit different. The first thing I want to do is get rid of that lava, because I don't need that color in there, and that ground. So right-click on both of those channels and just get rid of them. This first one was our lava, so black is about the right color, but I don't think I want it to recede so sharply. Maybe something along the lines of a dark gray. Likewise, our color white, we want to project out towards us, which is our rock. So I'm going to, instead of white, I want to kind of go with a lighter gray there. Something fairly bright, but not too overly bright. Let's take a look at what we've kind of accomplished here. And right off the bat, we can see that our displacement is probably a little extreme, but our lava has definitely receded, and now we've got these huge cliff sides to this guy, right? Here's our surface. So clearly we've used way too much displacement. Displacement should kind of usually be a subtle effect. Other renderers, etc., can be a little bit better as far as how displacement works. V-Ray, for instance, has a wonderful displacement use. But our mental rate does a pretty decent job too. Let's reduce that down to 5 and get a little bit more subtle of an effect, and try that render again. Now we're getting some, some shadows from our default lighting, and our rocks are kind of sticking out here. We've got some definite definition. Okay, there we go. All the way around here. Again, this will look a lot better when we've got lights in the scene. So real quick here, I'm going to go ahead and create a standard light, although we haven't talked about lights much yet. So I'm going to go over my Create tab, third button into Lights, and then change that drop down from photometric to standard. I'm going to use a mental ray mister area omni here real quick, just to give us some light in the scene, and then click kind of up here in my front view in the upper right hand corner, like where our sunshine might be. I can close that guy, get my move tool, and then maybe in my front view pull it forward a little bit so that not my entire thing is in shadow there. And then we can kind of see what it's going to look like with just some actual light involved here. And now our jutting rocks may look a little bit nicer. We're getting some kind of fun lava to rock here, looking kind of a shader. Other things we might do would be, since the lava itself glows, would be, let's quickly reduce our intensity multiplier on our light. And again, we have not gone over this stuff, so I'm going to kind of hurriedly go through this just so that we can see our final result working for us a little bit better as our texture is concerned, which is what we're really into or interested in today. Light little ambient light source there. There, that's a little bit more even keel as far as our lighting. None of those sharp black shadows. So our actual texture should look a little bit better now. And I'll show you how to do all that lighting stuff as this course continues, of course. And there we go. Islands of rock surrounded by rivers of molten lava. I hope this at least gave you an idea on the things that you can create with procedural texturing. With this sort of texturing inside 3D Studio, we have multiples of millions of possibilities, as you can see, right? We've made anything from a brick wall today all the way on to rivers of lava and islands of rock, and then everything in between. Procedural texture is a very powerful way of creating a texture without having to do all of the work inside of Photoshop or a program of the like. And as you can see, we can come up with some pretty good looking stuff. Not too bad. And then rather than make you wait while this thing renders with me, I've gone ahead and rendered a sample image of this and stopped the video and then started up again here, obviously, to show you the final result that is actually not looking too shabby here, right?